Today we're finally talking about the Hampshire, the latest premium tier 8 cruiser with a web campaign and a pretty interesting camo, I gotta say. I think this thing's really cool. Not to everyone's liking, but it's a pretty interesting camo. But as for the ship, is it worth you investing into, looking at, spending time on this web campaign? It's pretty good. I gotta say, I was expecting it to have a heal, so when it didn't, I was a little disappointed. And I may have been a little bit too negative on it initially, but I had really good games in it today. I've played 5 games so far, and we'll look at the stats at the end, but I think I'm averaging a little over 110,000 damage, which is really good, and much more than I was expecting out of an AP-only cruiser, especially at tier 8. So AP only, no heal, it's pretty big, it's a big target, even though the concealment's pretty solid. I was assuming that this was going to be an absolute awful experience where you get hit a couple times and you're just forced to play so far back. And tier 8, of course, doesn't have the best matchmaker in the world, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but this ship actually performed really well, and it really comes down to these armor-piercing shells. They've been buffed so much that they do feel pretty good. They're not fully like Sap, because you can actually Citadel things, and they do bounce and shatter a little bit more than Sap would at extreme angles, but the AP is surprisingly consistent. It does really good damage, and of course we have a 10-second reload on 10 203s at tier 8, which is really solid. Right, we can think of things like Atago that have a 16-second reload on 10 203s, although that's maybe not the most fair comparison. Atago really isn't about its DPM. But this ship has high alpha damage, very impactful AP, and a pretty solid reload to go with it. So I found that getting damage wasn't too difficult. The problem was kind of staying alive and having battle impact, right? So we're not having radar on this ship. We don't have a heal that allows us to play really aggressive. A lot of my best games really came like this, where people just don't shoot at me. I don't know why people weren't shooting at me, but they just weren't. So I was able to take slightly more aggressive positions and impact the game that way with smart positioning. But if you get caught out, just remember that the ship doesn't have a ton of HP. My build does include survivability expert, so we're getting extra HP from there. It's around 37,000 base, which isn't a lot at tier 8 with not the best armor either. We'll go over that in a little bit as well once we're back in port. But the armor viewer is really strange on this ship. It has an extremely weird citadel that allows us to maybe tank a little bit better. There's a great example of the consistency on the armor piercing, by the way. 5,000 damage at that angle and distance. It's pretty good. Pretty good. But I found that as soon as I got myself into tier 10 games, yeah, my battle impact dropped off a cliff. But that's basically like all tier 8 cruisers. It's very difficult to make use of cruisers in tier 10 games. It's just too passive. And while this ship has really good range for a tier 8 cruiser and a spotter plane to go with it, the shells are floaty, so it's very difficult to actually lead targets at those really long ranges. So I really found myself not even using the spotter plane a lot of the time, since I would rather use my concealment to get closer and reposition than make myself a long range target where I'm really not going to do all that much damage. But this couple of salvos here is really where I understood that this AP is different. This is a Benson, a very small, narrow destroyer. These are big caliber guns, and we're not overpenning them. We're not overpenning a DD at all with 203s at this range. So this AP is pretty solid. You can rely on it to be really good, even against light cruisers and especially against battleships too. You hit superstructures, you're gonna do some pretty solid damage. Overall, you want to aim for upper belts on battleships, right? Cruisers, you can do some pretty good damage. Even citadeling, I've citadeled a couple of cruisers out to 15 kilometers, so it retains its pen reasonably well as well. These torps aren't amazing. They're not nothing to, they're just okay. You get 8 of 10-kilometer torps that do okay damage, and they have reasonable speed, but this ship really doesn't want to be brawling all that much, even though we're going to go in and brawl late game here. It's not a situation where you want to be taking those close range engagements all that often. I think mid-range is really where this ship is going to shine. But let's talk a little bit about this web campaign. You get a few tries once you've completed all the web campaign missions. You get a few tries at the loot box in the Armory to get this ship. And if you don't get it, then you have to get it from the Admiral package in the premium shop, which includes a ton of extra bonuses and credits that you don't really need or want to be buying with real money. It's much better to earn those in-game, certainly. So with this ship, that's really the only way to get it for now. Coming in early 2023, it should just be available for the normal tier 8 price for a premium, without the extra bundles, just the standard pack, right? Which I guess for Canadian dollars would be in that $50 or $60 range. Depends on your home currency, right? But I think it's a decent tier 8 cruiser. I don't personally think I would get it. Tier 8 cruisers are in a rough spot. As soon as you get into tier 10 games, it's tough. Even tier 9 games, the DPM and tankiness of cruisers takes a massive leap as soon as you get to tier 9, because of course they all get heals, and they all get access to the slot 6 upgrade slot, right? And you get DPM or range from that. It's tough playing a tier 8 cruiser into those higher tiers. Against its own tier, it's very good, as you can see. And we're even rushing down 2 battleships here. And we'll look at the armor viewer import, but I'm playing very intentionally here. I'm going directly bow into this North Carolina because my Citadel is basically only at the back of my ship. There's no Citadel up front. So I'm hoping that if he shoots my bow, his shells will arm before they even reach my Citadel. So he'll get some full pens, but he won't be able to kill me in this situation. And sure enough, he gets a few full pens, but we don't really mind at this point. We'll launch our torpedoes and try and finish him off here. So I'm trying to caution you against this ship a little bit. I think that it does require a certain playstyle to really take advantage of. You have to know how to use cruisers and get yourself into positions where not only are you going to do good damage, but you need to get on flanks of ships, right? Because bow on, even though the AP is really solid, improved pen angles, seemingly also just doesn't want to overpen also with the short fuses, you're going to be bouncing against bow on targets. So you have to know how to play cruisers without a heal, right? You got to play a little bit aggressive when you want to be flanking and catching people out, and no heal to potentially come back from a mistake. And it's a little bit tricky, but it is a good ship. I do think it's a really good, interesting tier 8 cruiser. Not a lot of them play like this. They all tend to have at least some HE that allows them to do good in bow on situations. This one doesn't, but it does have incredible armor piercing. And of course, like all premiums, you can make a lot of credits with it, right? I was getting a lot of these near million credit games with just a little bit of the credit modifiers, right? 4 kills, nearly a Kraken in this one, even 2.6 thousand base XP. And we managed to brawl it out, getting a little bit lucky against some of those battleships. So I did have a pretty good session of 5 games here, getting 112,000 average damage, which is really, really good for a tier 8 cruiser. Keep in mind, though, only one of these was against tier 10, and it didn't go well. It was around 50k damage. So keep that in mind, that even though I did have a really good time with it so far, I did get some very favorable matchmaker with it. And as far as the armor, yeah, 25 bow, and it's just so much 25, right? And if we take away all this stuff, right, you get a 30mm deck, which is pretty good. It's no Atago 41mm deck, but 30 is decent enough. 27 on the sides here, and that's your Citadel, right? So that is it. It's only barely in front of the smokestack here, and it even ends before your rear turrets. So I don't know where the ammo's being stowed and if there's these like horizontal conveyors, but apparently we just don't need a Citadel underneath these guns for whatever reason. But that's why I was going bow in, right? I was like, this is such a long distance for a shell to travel once it hits my bow. It probably arms and detonates around here, and it won't be able to Citadel me. Of course, broadside, it is above water, but it's so small. It doesn't even run the length of the ship, like where the guns are at all. So it's a very precise spot to hit. Once people know where to shoot, I think it'll probably get Citadel'd more broadside, but for now, I mean, I wouldn't have known to shoot there. I would have shot under the guns. That's pretty standard thought of where do you hit a citadel? Well, probably where the ammunition is stowed, right? As far as the build that I was running, notice I'm not even taking Superintendent. I don't think these consumables are really worth getting an extra one for. So I'm taking extra HP. I'm taking more damage out of the AP shells since that's all we have. Of course, we're running Adrenaline Rush, Concealment, pretty standard stuff. Even running Top Grade Gunner, it can help in some situations. Priority Target and Incoming Fire Alert. This was kind of handy for some of those situations where I was caught out in open water. But even that, you don't need both of them. Take one and then try and pick a different skill. I just wasn't sure what to throw my last point into. I went with Incoming Fire Alert. I didn't notice my rudder or engine getting knocked out that much, so even Last Stand doesn't seem to be too necessary. As far as equipment goes, yeah, Concealment, we're taking rudder here because no propulsion mods available. The propulsion was just fine. The acceleration was seemingly better than normal, but it's no like Minotaur, for example, where you're just drifting around the map, right? Aiming Systems Mod 1, I think you just have to take that with a ship so focused on AP and hitting specific parts of ships. And notice I did take the Grease the Gears skill, and that's just to make the ship feel a little bit more comfortable to play in those situations where you do have to turn your turrets from side to side. I should notice that this middle turret here is a 360 turret. None of the other ones are, but that is just a nice little comfort thing to have on a ship. So my first impressions of the Hampshire are pretty positive. I had a really good set of games and had a lot of fun using an AP focused ship. I think the downsides really do come with the matchmaker that I haven't experienced too much of. Tier 10's tough as a cruiser without a heal that relies on flanking and playing a little bit more of an aggressive role. So your mileage may vary there, but I think we can all agree this camo is a pretty cool one if you're interested in the non-historical ones. So let me know what you think of the Hampshire in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.